From evil queens falling to their doom to sea witches getting impaled by ships, Disney has given us some absolutely brutal villain deaths over the years. While these movies are made for families, the ways these bad guys meet their end can be surprisingly dark and twisted. We're counting down 10 Disney villain deaths from the least gruesome to the most shocking. Before we dive into the carnage, these deaths prove that Disney wasn't afraid to show consequences for evil actions, even in animated films. Each villain on this list met their end through their own choices, and some of these scenes are darker than anything you'll see in modern horror films. Ready to see just how visceral Disney can get when the gloves come off? Number 10. Jafar from Aladdin. The royal vizier of Agrabah thought he had it made when he transformed into an all-powerful genie. Jafar's massive blue form towered over the desert city, wielding magic beyond imagination. But like every Disney villain, his arrogance became his downfall. When Aladdin tricks him into becoming a genie, Jafar gets exactly what he asked for. The problem? Genies come with one tiny restriction. They're bound to their lamps for eternity. The moment Jafar transforms, golden shackles appear around his wrists, and he's sucked into a tiny brass prison. What makes this relatively tame compared to the others on our list is that Jafar doesn't actually die. He's trapped, which is arguably worse than death. But there's no violence or graphic imagery involved, just cosmic justice served with a side of irony. Jafar wanted ultimate power and got ultimate imprisonment instead. The lamp gets hurled into a cave somewhere in the desert, where presumably Jafar will spend the next 1,000 years going insane. Not pleasant, but definitely the least brutal way to handle a villain on this list. Number 9. Captain Hook from Peter Pan. The infamous pirate captain of the Jolly Roger had a simple goal: kill Peter Pan and take over Neverland. What he got instead was a one-way ticket to the belly of a very persistent crocodile. After Peter Pan defeats him in sword combat, Captain Hook finds himself dangling from the ship's rigging above the waiting jaws of the crocodile who had been hunting him throughout the entire film. This massive reptile had already gotten a taste of Hook's hand years earlier and had been following the sound of the ticking clock in Hook's stomach ever since. The actual death happens off-screen. We see Hook fall toward the crocodile's open mouth, and then the scene cuts away. When we return, the crocodile is swimming away with a very satisfied expression, and Hook is nowhere to be found. The clock's ticking can be heard coming from inside the crocodile's belly. It's clearly fatal, but Disney keeps the actual consumption hidden from view. We know what happened, but we don't have to see the graphic details of a man being eaten alive by a giant reptile. The implied nature of his end puts it higher than Jafar, but the off-screen execution keeps it relatively low on our gruesome scale. Number 8. Mother Gothel from Tangled. For centuries, Mother Gothel had maintained her youth by using Rapunzel's magical hair. This seemingly gentle woman had kidnapped a baby princess and raised her in isolation, all to maintain her own beauty and youth. When Eugene Fitzherbert, better known as Flynn Rider, cuts Rapunzel's hair, Mother Gothel's centuries finally catch up to her all at once. The transformation is immediate and horrifying. Her smooth skin begins to wrinkle and sag. Her golden hair turns gray, then white, then begins falling out in clumps. Her back hunches over as the weight of centuries crushes down on her aging spine. Within seconds, she transforms from a beautiful middle-aged woman into an ancient crone. But it doesn't stop there. The aging process continues accelerating until she's nothing but dust. Mother Gothel reaches desperately toward the window, trying to escape her fate, but her body crumbles away. The purple cloak that once held a living woman collapses to the floor, filled with nothing but ash and dust that scatters in the wind. The truly unsettling aspect of this end is how personal it feels. Mother Gothel experiences every moment of her accelerated aging. She feels her body betraying her, feels herself literally crumbling to nothing. The fear in her eyes as she realizes what's happening is genuinely disturbing, especially since she brought this fate entirely on herself. Number 7. Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. The arrogant hunter who terrorized the Beast's castle met his end in a fall that Disney made surprisingly dark with one subtle detail. After stabbing the Beast in the back during their fight on the castle's roof, Gaston loses his footing and plummets into the misty abyss below the castle walls. During his fall, there's a brief moment where the camera shows Gaston's face in close-up. The mist and darkness obscure exactly what happens when he hits the bottom, but the height of the fall and the skull imagery make it clear that Gaston dies on impact. Unlike some other falling deaths in Disney movies, this one includes that subtle but unmistakable death imagery. Gaston earns a higher spot because of that moment of realization. He knows he's going to die during the fall, and we see the terror in his eyes. The skull pupils are Disney's way of showing us that death is coming. Number 6. The Evil Queen from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Disney's very first animated feature film gave us one of their most brutal villain deaths, and they set the bar incredibly high for future films. The Evil Queen, disguised as an old hag, pursues pursues the seven dwarfs up a mountain during a thunderstorm, determined to finish off Snow White once and for all. When the dwarfs corner her on a rocky ledge, the evil queen attempts to use a massive boulder to crush them. She pries at the rock with a fallen branch, trying to send it rolling down onto her pursuers. Just as the boulder begins to shift, a lightning bolt strikes the cliff directly at her feet. The lightning strike crumbles the ledge beneath her, sending the evil queen plummeting into the dark abyss below. But Disney didn't stop at just showing her falling. As she disappears into the darkness, we hear her final terrified scream echoing off the canyon walls. The real brutal twist comes next. The boulder she had been trying to use as a weapon follows her down into the chasm. We see it toppling over the edge, heading straight for where she fell. The implication is clear. Even if the fall didn't kill her, she's about to be crushed by several tons of rock. This sequence works on multiple levels of poetic justice. The weapon she intended for others becomes the instrument of her own destruction. The lightning strike serves as divine intervention, punishing her for her vanity and attempted murder. Number 5. Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. The self-proclaimed mistress of all evil earned her title through decades of terrorizing King Stefan's kingdom, but her death scene remains one of Disney's most visceral. After transforming into a massive fire-breathing dragon, Maleficent battles Prince Philip on a cliff high above the kingdom. The fight is intense. Maleficent's dragon form towers over Prince Philip, breathing fire that could melt armor and wielding claws that could tear a man in half. When the three good fairies enchant Philip's sword with the power of truth, he hurls it directly at Maleficent's heart. The sword of truth pierces her chest with a sickening thud, and while Disney opted for a dark, ink-like void rather than red blood, the sound design is what sells the brutality. We hear the blade enter as Maleficent's scream of pain and rage echoes across the kingdom, her realization that she's been fatally wounded clear to everyone. But the sword wound isn't the end. As Maleficent staggers backward in agony, she loses her footing on the cliff edge and tumbles into the darkness below. Her massive dragon body crashes into the rocks at the bottom, and her form disintegrates into smoke and shadow. The brutality of this scene stems from the combination of the graphic stabbing and the fall. We hear the impact of the wound, feel her pain, and watch her body crumble from the fall. It's a death that works on both physical and symbolic levels, showing that evil ultimately destroys itself. Number 4. Scar from The Lion King. The treacherous brother who murdered Mufasa and usurped the throne of Pride Rock met his end through betrayal by his own allies. After Simba defeats Scar in combat and throws him from Pride Rock, the former king finds himself face to face with the hyenas he had been manipulating throughout the entire film. During the final battle, Scar had desperately tried to save himself by blaming everything on the hyenas. He told Simba that they were the real enemies, that he had been forced into his actions by their pressure. The hyenas overheard this conversation, and they didn't appreciate being thrown under the bus. When Scar lands at the bottom of Pride Rock, injured and vulnerable, the hyenas surround him. Their eyes glow in the firelight from the burning Pride Lands, and their expressions show nothing but hunger and betrayal. They remember every promise Scar made about never going hungry again, and they remember how he just tried to sacrifice them to save his own skin. The actual killing happens in silhouette. We see the shadows of the hyenas leaping onto Scar, their forms dark against the orange flames consuming Pride Rock. We hear Scar's terrified screams, but the visual is kept to shadowy shapes that suggest rather than show the graphic details. The horror of this specific defeat is found in the context. Hyenas eat their prey alive, taking their time to consume their victim. Scar's death isn't quick or merciful. He's literally torn apart and devoured by animals he thought he could control. The fact that it happens during a massive fire adds another layer of horror to an already disturbing scene. Number 3. Ursula from The Little Mermaid. The sea witch who terrorized the underwater kingdom met her end in one of Disney's most violent and graphic death scenes. After using King Triton's trident to transform herself into a colossal monster, Ursula towers above the ocean, larger than ships and wielding the power of the seas themselves. Prince Eric, sailing an old shipwreck through the storm-tossed waters, realizes he has one chance to stop the gigantic sea witch. He steers the ship directly toward Ursula, aiming the jagged, broken bow straight at her massive form. The ship's momentum carries it forward like a battering ram. The broken bow of the ship pierces Ursula's abdomen, running her completely through. We see the wooden spear protruding from both sides of her body as she realizes what has happened. Her expression shifts from rage to shock to agony as the reality of her mortal wound sets in. But Disney didn't stop there. Lightning strikes Ursula's impaled form, electricity coursing through her body and, for several frames, the strobe effect reveals her skeleton flashing through her skin. As Ursula dies, her massive form begins to sink beneath the waves, taking the shipwreck with her. The ocean doesn't turn red, but fills with thick black ink and glowing magical energy as she disappears into the depths. Her death throes create whirlpools and tidal waves that threaten to destroy everything around her. The impact of this death stems from the graphic impalement combined with that supernatural strobe effect. We see the weapon exit her body, see the ink clouding the water, and watch her experience every painful second of her end. Number 2. Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog. The shadow man who made deals with spirits from the other side discovered the hard way that you don't default on payments to supernatural entities. When his plan to gain control of New Orleans fails, the spirits he owes money to come to collect, and they're not interested in payment plans. Throughout the film, Dr. Facilier had been borrowing power from his friends on the other side, voodoo spirits who exist in a realm between life and death. These entities had been fronting him magical power in exchange for future payment. When Facilier fails to deliver on his promises, they decide to collect on the debt personally. The spirits emerge from gravestones throughout the cemetery, their ghostly forms surrounding the terrified witch doctor. These aren't friendly ghosts, they're malevolent entities with glowing eyes and reaching hands, and they've come to drag Facilier back to their realm to pay for his borrowed power. Facilier tries desperately to negotiate, offering them anything else in exchange for his freedom, but the spirits aren't interested in hearing excuses. They grab him with shadowy hands and begin pulling him toward a massive gravestone that opens like a portal to the underworld. The true horror of this sequence lies in Facilier's reaction. He knows exactly what's happening to him and exactly what waits for him in the spirit realm. His screams of terror as he's dragged away aren't just fear of death, they're fear of eternal torment in a supernatural prison. The gravestone slams shut behind him, and we see his face pressed against the stone from the inside, his hand clawing desperately at the surface. Then even that disappears, leaving only a gravestone with his face carved into it as a permanent memorial to his fate. Number 1. Clayton from Tarzan. The hunter who came to Africa to capture and sell Tarzan's gorilla family earned the distinction of having Disney's most brutal and graphic villain death. During the final battle in the treetops, Clayton becomes entangled in jungle vines while fighting Tarzan with a machete. In his blind rage, Clayton hacks at the vines trying to free himself, not realizing that one of them has slipped around his neck like a noose. Tarzan sees what's happening and tries to warn him, shouting Clayton's name in desperation, but Clayton is too consumed with fury to listen to reason. Clayton cuts through the final vine holding his weight, sending both him and Tarzan plummeting toward the jungle floor. Tarzan manages to grab onto other vines and swing to safety. Clayton isn't so fortunate. As he falls, the vine around his neck runs out of slack and snaps tight with an audible crack. When lightning flashes through the jungle canopy, it illuminates Clayton's shadow hanging from the vine, his body swaying slightly in the breeze. That shadow, visible for a brief but unmistakable moment, shows us exactly what happened. Clayton's lifeless form dangles from the makeshift noose, a dark silhouette against the jungle backdrop. It's an image that would haunt anyone who caught it. Clayton secures the top spot because of the sheer graphic reality of the moment and the fact that Tarzan tried to save him. This wasn't a villain getting his comeuppance through cosmic justice. This was a man dying through his own anger and refusal to listen to reason, while the hero watched helplessly. The psychological impact on both Tarzan and the audience is devastating. We see Tarzan's face as he realizes what happened, and there's no satisfaction there. Only sadness and pity. Clayton's death serves no one and helps no one. It's just a brutal, senseless waste of life that could have been prevented. Disney's decision to show the hanging shadow was a deliberate cinematic choice that was controversial even within the studio. Some versions of the film on television have edited out the shadow or reanimated the scene to make it look like Clayton simply fell to his death. But in the original theatrical release, the image is unmistakably clear. Clayton's death stands out as the darkest moment in Disney animated history because it combines graphic violence with emotional complexity. It's not just about a villain getting defeated, it's about the cost of unchecked rage and the tragedy of a man who destroyed himself through his own choices. So there you have it, 10 Disney villain deaths ranked from least to most gruesome, proving that family entertainment can still pack a serious punch when it comes to consequences. From Jafar's magical imprisonment to Clayton's brutal hanging, Disney has never shied away from showing that evil actions lead to dark endings. If you made it through this entire countdown, you're clearly not squeamish about animated violence. Check out our breakdown of the darkest Disney moments that somehow made it past censors, where we dive into even more shocking scenes that Disney slipped into their family films.